Does your new computer come with built-in Microsoft spyware? Is Satya Nadella or Steve Ballmer or Bill Gates or all three looking over your shoulder every time you do something on your CoPilot PC? It's time to clear up the recent drama around Microsoft's new Recall feature for Windows 11. Recall is part of a suite of CoPilot Plus features, an offshoot of the CoPilot AI assistant that's currently exclusive to new hardware powered by Qualcomm's Snapdragon X series. It's turned out to be pretty controversial, so why is that? Well, it's basically browsing history on steroids for your entire computer, a feature that quite literally watches everything you do on your PC and feeds it to an AI so it can be regurgitated and queried at a later time. From there, it's searchable, and Recall can understand the contents and context of what's on your screen. The big idea is that this reduces the cognitive workload of remembering where you saw that file or presentation slide and potentially making you a lot more productive and less frustrated. It's designed to work more like human memory in terms of time, tasks, and actions instead of files, folders, and apps. And yeah, it turns out the public reaction to this has been mixed, to put it mildly. And proponents would say that Recall is designed to be helpful, not creepy, by applying AI to your PC-based working life. The only way a feature like Recall can work is by periodically looking at your screen. And after all, your browser records your web history, your ISP knows every website you visit. Recall isn't all that different, and after all, you can turn it off, and the data it does record is encrypted anyway. Critics would say no, it is in fact pretty damn creepy, and besides being an unacceptable privacy infraction, represents a massive honeypot of extremely personal data for anyone with malintent who gets access to your PC. To say nothing of the potential for misuse by employers, governments, or law enforcement. The controversy around this feature began shortly after its announcement. In a pre-release version of Recall, a security researcher discovered that once you're logged into your Windows account, certain parts of Recall's data are stored in what basically amounted to a plain text database. The more details on Recall's inner workings became public, the more the public narrative turned against it. While its screen capturing capability does look out for major copyright holders like big movie studios by not capturing their content, regular users are not paid the same courtesy. Things like passwords, sensitive financial information, and social security numbers are apparently fair game should that data happen to be on screen at the time Recall decides to take a screenshot. As a result, at the time we're making this video, if you pick up one of the first generation of CoPilot PCs powered by Qualcomm's Snapdragon X series, you won't find Recall on there at all. Recall has been recalled.
He said it! He said it!
That's a pretty major development considering it was the biggest big deal feature at that CoPilot Plus launch event. Tom Warren of The Verge reports the decision to delay availability of Recall on CoPilot PCs came on June 13th, just 5 days before the planned launch, requiring last-minute updates to be pushed out, disabling the feature. Microsoft says it's adjusting the release model of Recall to leverage the expertise of the Windows Insider community to ensure the experience meets our high standards for quality and security. I ran that through my Corpo to English translator, and yeah, sure sounds like as a result of all that recent drama, Microsoft wants to make sure that when Recall does go public, it does so with zero questions around how private or secure it is. But even before this, Microsoft was already scrambling to try and get ahead of this negative publicity. In a blog post earlier in June, Microsoft had laid out some steps it'd be taking around privacy and security. First, while previously it seemed that Recall would be enabled as standard out of the box on CoPilot PCs, the company has changed tack and now says it'll be off by default, with a clear choice to enable it after reading a brief explainer of what it actually does. Second, proof of presence through Windows Hello will be required to view your Recall timeline. This means it'll need to confirm that you're actually there and, more importantly, that you're actually you before viewing that timeline. There'll also be similar precautions in place for just-in-time decryption of your Recall snapshots. That should address the old plain text database snafu that Microsoft was previously pulled up on. And the post also went into more detail on how Recall will actually work, both the user-facing stuff and behind the scenes. Snapshots are local, never shared, and there'll be a little icon in the taskbar to tell you when they're saving. You'll be able to filter which apps and websites are included and which aren't, and your IT admin won't be able to force Recall on your machine without your consent, which, let's be honest, corporate IT already has plenty of other ways of spying on you while you work anyway. It's a detailed explanation that sounds pretty reasonable. Nevertheless, there's that old truism that states that the more you have to explain, the more you've already lost the argument. This argument is just as much about vibes as it is the technical reality of what Recall is or isn't doing on your CoPilot Plus PC. And the feeling here is still of a slightly sketchy software feature that has been rapidly rolled back on. When it comes to tech companies having their way with your personal data, former Google CEO Eric Schmidt once said this about the limits of how far his company would go.
There's what I call the creepy line, and the Google policy about a lot of these things is to get right up to the creepy line but not cross it.
Recall, through its very nature, was already stepping right up to that creepy line, and once the privacy concerns started to surface online, it suddenly pole vaulted right across it. With hindsight, Microsoft should have led much more strongly on the privacy angle in announcing Recall in the first place all those weeks ago. Instead, it's been left scrambling to implement technical solutions and battle negative publicity around this major tentpole feature. Now, the good news for Microsoft is that its technical answer to how it's making Recall secure makes sense on the face of it, and the idea behind it really is actually a pretty good one. In order for AI to be more helpful in your workflow, it needs to learn that workflow, and to do that, it needs to watch you work. However, that vibes problem remains. Recall exists at the intersection of AI and surveillance, and that's an uncomfortable place, especially for a trillion-dollar tech giant whose argument to many users will seem to boil down to little more than, "Trust me, bro." It's very easy for users to imagine the potential worst-case scenario for this kind of technology. Your entire PC usage history fed into an AI and instantly scrutinizable. At worst, it's a Black Mirror episode, or the Orwellian worst-case scenario of what people imagine from a social credit system. The slippery slope hypothetical about where this could lead in future is easy to make, even if, right now, your Recall timeline is secure, encrypted, and local. Microsoft has to know that the success or failure of Recall will come down just as much to user trust as the technical capabilities of what it's built. So when the public launch of Recall does happen, I'd expect a doubling down on the messaging around how secure and private it is, and most of all, letting users see what Recall is actually doing in order to build that crucial trust. Because after its fumbled launch, Microsoft can expect intense scrutiny of the version of Recall that does eventually publicly arrive. Is that just-in-time encryption working as advertised? Is there any unintended personal information getting caught up in Recall's data dragnet? And what about the largely unaddressed possibility of not just your data, but your employers, your families, and friends getting hoovered up too? Because ultimately, this is a feature that potentially touches 100% of what appears on any display connected to your PC. Despite that, I really don't think any of the recent controversy poses any existential threat to Recall, at least for now. The much more likely outcome, I think, is that eventually the technology comes to non-Qualcomm chips, and with time just becomes another part of the tapestry of Windows features we use every day. As that happens, the Recall launch debacle should fade from memory, recalled as just another cautionary tale of what can happen when you apply the mantra of move fast and break things to the world of AI. That's it for now. Be sure to subscribe and share your thoughts on CoPilot Plus and Recall down in the comments, and stay tuned for our coverage of the new Snapdragon-based CoPilot Plus PCs coming very soon. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.